Hello, I'm Dapper Dan Gavoston, and I own every issue of Amazing Spider-Man, including the annuals, which definitely count.
And I'm mischievous Mark Giannacchio, and I own every issue of Amazing Spider-Man. But Dan, the annuals don't count. But man, I would sure count a Daredevil number 16 right now.
Well, Mark is alluding to, I went to my first comic convention back, I guess since the beginning of COVID times, and I picked up a bunch of key books that I'm really thrilled about. But I've got Mark drooling over one in particular, and that is Daredevil number 16, which, for those of you who don't know, is the first time that John Romita Sr. drew Spider-Man. It was kind of his test book before he replaced Ditko, over in Amazing Spider-Man proper. But, I mean, the guy just kind of hits it out of the park from moment one. I mean, all the characters you love from his Amazing Spider-Man run are there in Daredevil 16. And I've been looking for it a long time, and I found a really good deal on it. I'm really happy with the book I got, and I will relish any opportunity to make Mark jealous of a book I own. So that's been a lot of fun, and it's a special place in my heart because knowing about Daredevil 16 is what won me a competition to get John Romita Sr.'s signature, which I got on my Amazing Spider-Man number 50 that I also had signed by Stan Lee. So, I have a little bit of history with the book. And so getting that book kind of felt like completing that story in a way. And people who listen to the show for a long time know that story and are probably sick of me telling it. But there we go. It's the end of a journey with Daredevil
Yeah.
16.
With that said, Dan, you want to go back to the script?
Yeah, let's do it. So welcome, everybody, to the Amazing Spider Talk, the show where two fans and collectors uncover the strange, fun, and fascinating history of the Spider-Man comic universe and sometimes Daredevil. Thanks for joining us for this review episode of the Amazing Spider Talk.
Yeah, so today on the show, Dan, you and I, we're going to be talking about Amazing Spider-Man, Volume 5, number 66, Legacy number 867. The story is entitled Tangled Web. The issue was written by Nick Spencer, with pencils by Mark Bagley, inks by John Dell, colors by Brian Reber, and letters by VC's Joe Caramagna. The covers by Mark Bagley, John Dell, Brian Reber. This issue was first released in stores on May 19th, 2021. Dan, this one kind of out of nowhere had some major revelations, or at least teasings of revelations in it. So why don't we just get right into it?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think the place to start is with the title, Tangled Web. And this is kind of one of those standard catch up with everybody and all the lingering plot threads that have been going on, while we focused on another story for a while. This is the, supporting cast, roundup and moving into the next story book. So Tangled Web as a title, yes, is cheeky because it was the Tangled Web series of stories, but also, that's kind of the tangled webs we weave of all of our friends and associates. And in that regard, I thought this was a pretty strong issue. There were some good stuff for the supporting cast. I think ideally, and maybe back in the day, which is a day that doesn't exist anymore, where everything was rosy because we idolize nostalgia and our past more than our present. I think a book like this would have room for all of that, plus kind of like a Spidey adventure. But
Yeah.
I don't think in modern Spidey comics that's something you can do with quite so many balls that Nick Spencer is juggling. And you might say maybe there's too many balls that he's juggling to make any one of them stand out. But I still thought this was a good kind of issue. And I thought actually paid off that kind of plot beat that we got in the previous issue, where Peter realized kind of like, hey, I've been neglecting all of my relationships. And so, to at least kind of follow up on that thread, I thought, okay, great. We're actually keeping thematically consistent with this. And so I like that. And there was some good Peter stuff here too. So that's kind of my overall thoughts. Mark, what did you think about this book?
Yeah, similarly. I mean, I think this is one of those books where I would probably during like the Dan Slott run, I would have called it like the kind of moving all the pieces on the board up a square. I feel like we get a lot of that here. I mean, yeah, traditionally, I think in those comics we would have also have gotten like what's the main Spider-Man story going to be going forward. I mean, I know we're getting something with the Chameleon coming up next. I would have liked to maybe have seen some of that teased a little more substantially here. But the strength of this book for the last 59 years has always been its supporting cast. So I never begrudge having these stories where we kind of just do all-encompassing check-in on everybody. So from that end, it was really good. I know and we'll obviously get into the nitty gritty detail. I mean, we had some stuff with Kindred here, which kind of left me of a couple of minds, and I'll explain why when we get there. But like I said, like this was a needed kind of refresh to kind of restart in a new direction. If I just had one overarching complaint, it would have been like, let's kind of what you alluded to here. Let's find a way to get Spider-Man and his next story kind of moving forward too, because that seemed to be the one big thing that was neglected in this whole thing. So
Yeah, I mean, we get a couple moments with him in costume. I think like if this is the Dan Slott run, first of all, I think there would be less threads being woven together. I don't think Dan Slott really focused on supporting cast quite this heavily. And that's something we knocked him for. And so, like, I got to give praise where someone is doing the opposite. I think we would have gotten probably like an obligatory fight with the Lizard or some other foe that you really never posed a threat or any plot significance to Spider-Man. So, like, in lieu of that, I appreciate what we got here. It was more meaningful to me than like him beating up on some random dude. Although that stuff
yeah,
was fun. I think about that like Humberto Ramos drawn Lizard fight. That was kind of fun to read from, I don't know, whatever, 50, not 50, 100 issues ago. Oh my God. We're
right.
getting old, Mark.
Wait, you mean the lizard or the iguana?
Sorry, the iguana is what I meant to say.
Okay, because I was gonna say lizard's a pretty big deal, so I don't think that would be a throwaway. But yeah, or like white rabbit or whatever. Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. It's like it's one of those little kind of like sidebar smackdowns.
Yeah, and for all the guff we give Nick Spencer about you know, closing as many threads as he's reopening, there are some conclusions to stories here that I did find satisfying. I mean, whether it's the Tombstone Robbie stuff or Aunt May and Feast, it feels like those things are kind of like, books being closed a little bit. I'm sure we'll revisit them, but I do think this book has been operating in a much stronger place over the past dozen or so issues than it had been prior. And I think this is kind of a continual, trend in the positive direction for the title. Do you want to get into some of the specifics of it?
Yeah, I was gonna say, I mean, like, kind of in terms of dealing with characters whose stories were not closed off. I mean, we revisited Baron Mordo. Now obviously the Kingpin got what he needed from Boomerang last issue, and resurrected his son Richard, aka the Rose. Mordo is basically like, okay, I'm done with you, Kindred. And kind of and I shouldn't be surprised by this because we've had Norman and the Spot team up before recently, right? Am
Yeah.
I imagining that? Okay, yeah, but it's still like in the moment kind of surprised me, like, oh yeah, that's right, they're a thing. Like Norman shows up to save, excuse me, to save Kindred from Mordo with the Spot, which is probably like the biggest beat down that the Spot has ever probably issued, thanks to Norman and the element of surprise.
I
Now
did
Kindred
find it a little silly that the Spot was just like able to take out Mordo with like a punch. Like, this is
right,
like
right,
Doctor Strange's like ultimate villain, other than like
right.
Dormammu. And he's just like, just clocked out. But it makes
Well, you could
sense.
be a master of the dark arts, but if you don't see someone coming through a hole out of nowhere punching you in the face, I guess you go down like a shot. I don't know. That's my no prize there. So
Yeah, that's true. I mean, I guess like the Doctor Octopus rules are like his arms are superpowered, but he's just a dude, and so beating up on him takes its toll. Yeah, I mean, look, I could get hung up all day on like the mechanics of the Spot escaping because it's like, okay, you've got the Spot in prison, and he's also imprisoning Kindred. It is weird that it took Norman like opening a door and releasing him, to then free. It just feels like it's a little bit weird, the mechanics of it, but it's fine. And this isn't even one of those like it's comics kind of things. It's just like this is not a detail to get hung up on.
no,
And
no.
so Kindred is released from his Spot prison, yeah, we kind of leave that scene behind. Norman
Yeah,
rushes
and we
to
have
Kindred. Yeah.
yeah, and we have Kingpin reaffirming, with Richard's return, things are going to be different. I mean, we'll see. Like this whole plot development. Frankly, I mean, I appreciate that. They didn't go the obvious route of that we were all predicting, like, oh, he's going to resurrect Vanessa again.
Yeah.
Like, but I'm still kind of confused as to where this is going to go, and frankly, kind of like tying into the next scene, a little kind of underwhelmed by like the threat level that these heroes are kind of presenting as, that the Rose presents. I mean, and don't get me wrong, I really liked how this scene opened up with Spidey kind of being sullen, and looking down at the new Avengers, or whatever the clique we want to call them, the Defenders, whatever. And being like, how did I get duped by Boomerang? I thought he was changed, and now I've really made a mess because the Rose is back, and it's very bad news. Like, the Rose is obviously, he's a villain, but like, and I think he's a good villain, but like, it's, I don't know, we're not talking about like some cosmic powered foe here. It's not like,
Right.
oh, I brought back Thanos to like wipe out humanity. You know what I mean? Like, so I'm a little like, okay. I mean, like, you're selling drama here, but the drama might be a little overdone, overcooked here. I don't know. Do you see what I'm saying, or am I being too literal here?
No, I mean, if I had to peel back the curtain, that's exactly what I wrote. In the notes, it says like the Rose's return is quote very bad news end quote, and I'm not sure like what a few webs and a punch to the face really like does. Like the Rose was not like super powered; he was just very connected and could was a bit more like I don't know if he was more conniving than Kingpin, but he definitely was more chaotic than Kingpin and liked to kind of shake things up because he was trying to get at his father. And I don't really know what like a healed Rose who seems ostensibly like he'll have a better relationship with his father, like what threat he brings. Like he's not resurrected with his whole force of thugs. So I don't know like what will the Rose coming back mean that Kingpin is more chaotic? I mean, it seems like less so. He's like trying to heal things. So, I mean, I guess we'll see, but it does seem weird that everybody's reacting like it's the end of the world that the Rose was brought back.
Yeah, I mean, it's just, there's just nothing in the character's biography, and not to get too deep in the weeds here, but frankly, let's not forget when the Rose was first introduced by Tom DeFalco. I mean, like, I think the intent was that he was going to be Roderick Kingsley. So like, like, just saying, like you go back to the history of this character, it's not like, oh, it's the son of the Kingpin, and thus it's even more. It's the Kingpin times two or times 50 or whatever. You know what I mean? Like, it's just, I don't know. I'm a little like meh with that. But
I will say
the
like if we get like another like big fight between like those characters again, like reliving the 80s Hobgoblin stuff, we get Roderick Kingsley back, and he resurfaces. I'm always down for more Kingsley stories because I think he's a great character. Even in the modern interpretation of him, he's cool. I would love to see the Rose and Kingsley kind of like get back into it, and that was a fun era of books. So
Oh yeah, I mean this is the wheelhouse for good Spidey stuff. I don't want to make it. I don't want to diminish like what bringing like a character like the Rose means. It's yeah, it's. I think we're on the same page here, Dan. It's more about like, you know, it's not that I don't like the Rose. I think Rose is a great character, but it's just, you know, like let's not paint him out to be, you know, again like
Thanos.
Thanos or you know, or even like, oh, we brought back Doom or Red Skull, or you know what I mean? Like this is not an A plus alpha supervillain here. I mean, this is like a real cool street level Spider-Man villain. So like, let's calm down, guys.
He also would make a really good florist.
Yes, yes, absolutely. Um, the next kind of check-in was probably, I would say, my favorite part of the book, and you kind of mentioned it in the intro, so I'm assuming it was one of your favorites. I mean, this was kind of Randy and Robbie having the you know, it's funny, like I was not remotely surprised by the course of this conversation. Like I could have called this coming a mile away, like this, you know, I will still take you down the moment I can, you know, kind of exchange to them. But, you know, because our kids are together and happy with each other, we're cool as long as that's going on. And like that to me, like it's predictable, but it's an honest and sincere moment. And I feel like, you know, based on what Nick Spencer and company have done with Robbie and Tombstone over the last few issues, it felt earned and right and perfect. It's the perfect kind of bookend for the journey that these two characters have been on the last few months. So I appreciated that whole sequence tremendously.
Yeah, and I just liked the way this whole sequence was rendered. You know, we haven't mentioned Mark Bagley yet, but you know, this is right in his wheelhouse, which is like talking heads, but the setting of Minton's, like the jazz bar, I think it's really beautifully rendered, and it's rich with detail, which is not something, you know, like that I have, like I often say about Mark Bagley and his work. I mean, I even think back to Ultimate. As much as I love his pencils, you know, he would do a party scene and it would be like a bunch of bodies, but like very sparse on the extraneous detail because he's a fast worker. But I really think that since he's come back to this book, he really has kind of like put his all into building out that part of, you know, that side of him. And this to me was like kind of a real example of that. And I think Brian Reber's colors, the kind of rich browns and oranges and reds of the jazz bar, it was a, you know, like felt like alive. And I really liked this scene. And I think, you know, it was a good investment of time and artistic creativity. You know, also like you said, the exchange with Tombstone is, you know, he you know, it's Bagley. He's got a way with acting, you know, or directing his character, so to speak, on the page. And I'm still a little like weird about Robbie being okay with Randy's girlfriend being a villain or like a thief or whatever, but you know, I'll accept it, you know, in some regard. And I think Randy has made the point enough that she's like helping with Feast and stuff. So whatever.
I
Like
think yeah, I mean, like I think honestly, I get what you're saying. It doesn't bother me, you know,
yeah.
really much at all because for me, it's like it's just a father's love for his son. He just wants to see his son happy, and he sees that this woman makes him happy. I think that's that is I think that's the cutting through the Gordian knot of the whole thing. You know, like he just wants to see Randy happy, and thus what is willing to overlook these flaws because. But I get
I mean, classic
it.
soap operatics. You know, like
Yeah.
yeah, I'm not that worried about it. But yeah, I mean, this is fun. Again, like you
Yeah.
said, highlight of the book.
Yeah. So then the next kind of check in. This is where the book I don't want to say goes off the rails for me because that's a little melodramatic, but like frankly, this is the first thread where I'm kind of like, okay, what are we doing here? Is you know we have MJ looking, you know Bagley does a great job with MJ as always. and she's going to get into a car, and it turns out that it's Overdrive. And it's like, oh, like, hey, remember way back when we had this whole subplot with Carly Cooper? And like, frankly, I'm like reading this like, oh yeah, that's right, she's involved in this story somehow. But like, frankly, it's been so poorly woven together, Carly's role in all this, that like, like the impact of this is kind of, I don't know, I don't think it met with the impact that it was intended. And for me, it just kind of felt like we're opening up another big mystery here, because Overdrive is like, what, something's going on with Carly, she just disappeared. And now and MJ's going to look into it, and it just seems like, oh, we're going to put MJ in danger again. And I don't know, like, to me, this just fell flat for me. I wasn't feeling this.
I thought this was fine. I mean, I thought it was very minimal page, count on this plot, and I was happy to see it resurfaced, and I think it set up the end of this book pretty well, that we like are returning to it, and we're not just returning to something, which we'll talk about later. Like, there's a threat or an idea introduced, but it's nice to know that like someone's going to be proactive about it. Like, Overdrive cares about this woman that he professed his interest in, and Mary Jane is going to get in on the case. It gave me an excitement about like, oh, we're going to get to the bottom of this. This is going to move forward now. I mean, it's not a big scene, but for me, it was exactly what I needed to go like, oh, that was something that I was kind of interested in. I'm glad it wasn't totally forgotten. But yeah.
I mean, I get what you're saying. I guess for me, it's no, it wasn't a big scene. It's not like we wasted valuable pages here, but like, I mean, we have, I mean, at least with some of these other bits we've been getting, Mordo and Kindred and Robbie and Lonnie and all that kind of stuff. We've been getting regular check-ins and subplots with these characters for the last few months. I mean, I feel like we have completely abandoned Overdrive and Carly since, when was that? The prequel to Last Remains. I mean, it's been months, So I feel like if this is something that we were going to come back to in a meaningful way, that there should have been a few more check-ins. And I know, like, how many pages can you do here? But like this is kind of, this is the flip side of, I think, of this run of comics right now with Nick Spencer, is that the pacing of these stories is just so unevenly distributed that like you kind of lose track of what's important. And for me, like, it just felt more of a nuisance that we're coming back to this now. Like, oh, okay, so now this is important again. I need to care about it, even though no one really seemed to care about it for the last 3 months. So that's all where I'm coming from.
I feel like, that for me, the expression of that is like the timey-wiminess of it all. Like, and we can get into the final scene, but like it has Carly kind of waking up from being kidnapped, and it's like, right. Wait, like, when is this occurring? Like,
right.
Because like she was kidnapped, like you said, like 20 issues ago in the middle of the Last Remain story, or I guess, no, Sin's Rising. It was all the way back in Sin's Rising. So like, has she just been in stasis all that time, or what? So yeah, you're right. I mean, I think like ideally this would have been thrown in like maybe at the end of Last Remains or something, to kind of keep the thread alive on that. So I think where I'll make a concession to you is, I thought the scene was fine. It makes me excited to see more of it, but maybe the placement of it should have been much earlier, in the book.
Yeah.
Not this particular book. I mean, in the series.
Yeah, no, I understand. So then we do come back to Norman and Kindred, and I would, I know we had Kindred earlier in this book, but I think this is a distinct Kindred alarm here, because we have a very interesting sequence between Kindred and Norman that, like there is some subtext and text here that needs to be interpreted, right?
Yeah,
Why don't you kind
yeah.
of walk us through what happened here?
I mean, the end of this book is really interesting, but this scene to me is the most interesting in terms of like this ongoing Kindred story that we've like the most interesting revelation we've or so-called revelation we've gotten in a really long time. So we've got this like monologue from Kindred as he's kind of like dying or being saved from near death in the arms of Norman, and he's really playing it up, like how
Mm-hmm.
hurt he is and how much like he had to reduce Norman and take away his sins and the goblin persona to get Norman to this place where Norman would be able to save Kindred and create this healing process between them, that he fought his way through hell just so that he could get to this moment and reduce Norman to this point so that he could, heal him and heal their relationship. And right as he's kind of like reaching this climax where you think father and son in whatever twisted form of father and son this is,
Yeah.
are going to be reconnected in this moment of where Norman finally stepped up and cared about his son. He tells him, I've reduced you to this point where you're finally reveal who you really are without the Green Goblin, broken, scared, and defenseless. And then he wraps his centipedes around Norman and just like bashes him pretty hard. Like, I don't know if
Yeah.
Norman is dead. I don't think so, but it looks pretty brutal.
Pretty brutal. Yeah.
And then the most interesting thing is to end the scene, Kindred calls him just flatly idiot. And
Yeah.
there's a lot of subtext to break down here, and just straight up text. Mark, your reaction to this scene upon reading it?
Yeah, I mean, and it's kind of hard to talk about this without talking about the context of what we know about from the ending. But like, I mean, even in the moment, like is pretty loaded. I mean, I know it's just a word, but it's in this context. To me, it indicates like some duplicity, some subterfuge going on because obviously, he's kind of conning Norman into, being friendly and forgiving to him, but like, what about it is what about what Norman did makes him an idiot? Is he an idiot for wanting to mend fences? Is he an idiot because he believes Kindred in what he's saying or who Kindred is? You know what I mean? Like, and that's frankly where the context comes in. Like to me, like it's the word idiot here is loaded because you're just like you're wondering like you know is everything that we think is going on here actually happening? And again, kind of jumping ahead to the ending, it may not be, and that's pretty telling and interesting right now.
Yeah, I want to repeat I won't repeat everything you said, but I agree with it. Me reading it, like my immediate jump was like, everything we think we know about Kindred may not be true. Like
Yeah.
he is a manipulator, and I'm not sure to what point. Like that's the interesting thing is like his goal that he states here to Norman might still be true, right? He did want to use his powers to reduce Norman to who he thinks he is, broken, scared, and defenseless. And for what purpose, I'm not exactly sure. But it's like whether idiot means like I'm not your son and I've just been like using you this whole time under that pretense. And part of me is like, that's kind of exciting. But like you said, right, it's hard to apply the word idiot to what part of the statement, and what part of their relationship. It does make me think back to the last issue where we talked about Kindred, where it was weirdly suggested that only Norman could hear his pleas, and whether that's like a real statement, like physically only you can hear me, or an emotional one, like none of these people are empathetic enough to hear my cries for help. And I don't think that that's my prevailing theory, is that like Kindred has just borrowed the guise of Harry or appears differently to everyone. But there's certainly like idiot could imply that as well.
Yeah, and again, I do want to save some analysis for the
Right.
final reveal of this book, but like frankly, you and I were talking about this offline earlier. The key whenever we're talking about Kindred and Kindred's motivations and identity and any kind of specifics involving Kindred, you kind of go back to what the character himself said, which is it's not who I am, it's what I want.
Right.
And I don't know if the what is still clear, and we could talk about that somewhere later too. But like it's I think we're still, as critics, as fans, as everything, we're still struggling with some of this stuff, because I think we're still trying to read this as the Who, and it's just become abundantly clear, whether this is justified or not, that Nick Spencer is not writing about this from the perspective of who. It is only the what. And so like you kind of have to invert what you think about this character and what the character is doing, because you're trying to apply it to it's Harry. It could be some version of Harry, blah 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 blah. It doesn't matter. It's like just throw that aside and try and understand what's going on here. So when this character calls him an idiot, is it Harry? You're thinking, oh, Harry is calling him an idiot. Why is Harry calling him an idiot? It's really not Harry. It doesn't matter. You know what I mean? So like I'm just trying to say, like we have to kind of, I think, all collectively start looking at this much differently than what we've been doing for the last 3 years of this character.
Right, and that is the challenge about. Again, we can save this for the end. That's the challenge of the final reveal of this book. Is it still is trying to like kind of like make you think about the Who again, and and maybe like and that might get to the theory that it is nobody or everybody, depending on who's looking at it, because there is no Who. Like it takes on many different Who's. We'll see like where this goes. I have a bunch of different theories. Again, we'll talk about the end of the book. So let's move on before we stop. We got to stop saying we'll talk about the end of the book.
We're gonna move
let's
on.
get to the end of the book.
Let's run through the rest of these check-ins here, including Jonah, who is predictably ticked off that Peter ditched his whole meal ticket with the costume here. I mean, totally predictable Jonah blowhard scene, right?
Yeah, is this the first time in the comic we've had Jonah actually shout, "Get me some pictures of Spider-Man"? So like brazenly. I just thought that was really funny, and I was thinking like, maybe nobody's ever actually literally had him say that in the pages of the comic. But the interesting thing is that he is like, look, if I can't use Peter, I offered him this platform to redeem himself, which again, I felt like wasn't entirely fully fleshed out of like a beat, for him. And I'm not really sure I understand Peter's motivations there, because there wasn't really it wasn't really a choice for Peter. It wasn't like there was like someone's life hanging in the balance if he proved himself to be a hero on national television, so to speak. But Jonah promises to get a hero of his own, and we all know how well Jonah manufacturing superpowered characters goes. Do you have anyone in mind that you think like, oh, would be a good fit for working with Jonah as like his own personal like hero around town?
I mean, I'm sure it's going to be someone completely unworthy of it.
It's Razorback.
Yeah, right. Or I mean, you have a note here that I actually think is a good one, but I won't say it because it's your prediction, so you say it.
Well, I have two guesses, and one of them is Chance, because we've seen.
That's a good one. I think that's a good random anti-hero to throw out there.
Yeah, because he's still kind of out there operating, the last we saw him in that like floating fortress in the sky, and he's the kind of guy that's like a freelancer. So I could see that. And then, the cover of the next issue, which has like this split face between Chameleon and Spider-Man, I don't think that Jonah would straight up hire Chameleon, but like I could see Chameleon dressing up as Spider-Man and offering himself to Jonah in some
Right.
form. I don't think that necessarily is going to happen, but it could, and that could be kind of fun.
Yeah.
We could go back to the classic Chameleon dresses up as Spider-Man stories of the past.
Meanwhile, what's going on with Peter here? Because now I feel like Peter has kind of, the very typical revelation of, he's standing over the wreckage of everything that he's caused again. He has no roommates. He has no home. Where's Peter gonna go? What's Peter doing here?
Well, we don't really know where he's going to go necessarily, but he does take the money that he earned from Threats and Menaces and gives it to Aunt May, in an anonymous donation to repair Feast, which, I know that Feast was already kind of being repaired due to the connections with, Janice Lincoln. But I thought that was kind of a cool way to wrap up where that money went, although I don't know how Peter's going to survive without like his various jobs and employments and so on and so forth. But my guess is he's going to move in with MJ like we had talked about before. I mean, if he doesn't, that's kind of a weird, I don't know. It's not very 21st century, like people move in together. These two were engaged in the past. I feel like them moving in together is not a very big stretch.
Not a big deal. Yeah.
Yeah. So in the lieu or spirit of him wanting to kind of like heal some of his relationships and people he's neglected, way back when we kind of had this like off-panel suggestion that Betty was being called. I think it was during the 2099 arc. Betty was called to assignment overseas in Europe. And I remember making joke at the time, like, don't do it, Betty, because that's where your ex-husband or your former husband or whatever was murdered, on assignment in Europe. Poor Ned Leeds, before he was unceremoniously killed again and buried within
Right.
an issue, which I still kind of hold against Nick Spencer. I feel like there were stories to be told there that we never got, but it's just kind of a weird choice. But so Peter realizes he's got like 16 texts from Betty, who's back from Europe, and he goes to catch up with her at the Coffee Bean, only to find out, dun dun dun, Mark, what's up with Betty?
Betty is quite pregnant. The note here, and I don't think this is a bad question to be asking, is who's the father? Could it be the Ned? Well, no, she never met the Ned clone, right?
Right. They like Spider-Man like had him buried without her knowledge because he didn't want to like complicate it and mess her up. Right. So
Yeah,
like
yeah.
he got rid of the Ned. So she never knew unless she did and we didn't get to experience that. But I mean, clearly this seems to be implying that like this happened while she was in Europe, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
Always in Europe with these characters.
well, right. That's where you go to change your life, apparently.
Yeah, and get pregnant apparently, and with children.
Right, yeah. Or Harry, like I mean, the only other real Europe tie recently has been the Harry stuff. When he was in
Well, I was
Europe.
thinking also, I was thinking Sin's Past with Gwen. Wasn't that all in Europe?
Yeah, that was in Europe too, right? So then it was Norman Osborn. We're about to get another Sins Past story.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Please no.
I don't know. Do you have any legit guesses who the father could be?
I don't. I don't wanna throw that out there. I mean, like let's see what happens with the character here. I mean, like I like Betty. I feel like frankly no one has really known what to do with Betty for years now.
Right.
Maybe this can lead to something good, but yeah, I do hope for the character's sake. It's not something completely outrageous here, like
Yeah.
I know we're joking about Norman and Sin's Past and all that, but like, like if you're gonna do this, let's have it be something I think somewhat believable and befitting of a classic character. Don't make this like a circus here. My 2 cents. So
I mean, if I were a betting man, and I was betting on like the soap operatics where, every character change has to be related to someone we already know, right? Every villain under the mask is someone we already know. I think the safest bet would probably be that it's Flash's child because before he died, he and Betty kind of rekindled their relationship.
Yeah.
And, now that Flash is back from the dead, I guess we haven't really seen like what the circumstance, like what that looks like yet. So like there might be an opportunity there for Flash to become like a father or something, which could be interesting. But like my hope is like, this is my hope is that it's not anybody we know. And that Betty just made a decision that it was time for her to do something new in her life and become a mother or something. Like I think, or maybe she's been secretly,
which would be totally legitimate and nice and interesting, I think.
Yeah,
frankly.
or she's been secretly getting like in vitro fertilization, or I got a sperm donor. Like I think that would be interesting. I mean, it would be very similar to that like great Spider-Woman thing where everybody was speculating about it, and then it just turned out to be nobody. And honestly, I would find that really refreshing and kind of an interesting way to shake up the character. So we'll see, but an interesting kind of cliffhanger, if you will. But yeah, anyway, nice to see the cast kind of moving on. And it is interesting how these characters kind of like move on with their lives in some way or are aging up. And like the more they do this with these supporting cast characters, the more it makes Peter seem like he's standing still. And I wonder, as we do move forward in this Kindred thing, maybe this is finally a sign, all these things adding up, that like Marvel might be ready to move Peter on and allow Miles to be the young guy. That might be an interesting statement if Spencer is willing to make that. Okay, so enough on that. Let's get to the actual cliffhanger of this book.
I would just say the other, not the biggest reveal. It's not Betty Brant, but yeah. So we kind of flash over to this. We see Carly Cooper kind of trapped somewhere. Looks like it's in like a prison cell of some kind, and she's trying to find her way out. And then she looks up and sees, and I know we discussed this a little bit offline, like, was it who we thought it was? And I mean, to me, it seemed pretty clear. It's Harry Osborn basically being like, there's no point, you can't get out. And that's where it ends. And it's like, Harry, why is Harry here? I mean, like, I would also say, why is Carly here? But like, it's something's going on here. And there is Harry Osborn. And, like this, to go allude to what I was saying earlier, this all goes back to it's not the Who, because if it was the Who, Harry would be under the Kindred mask right now. So what's going on here, Dan? What are you making of this?
Okay, well, I have multiple theories about this. I mean, obviously they were both captured by Kindred and placed here. Like that is the kind of like underlying context. And I will say that like I did wrestle with this page, looking at it and going, is it Norman? Is it Harry? Because we saw Norman get captured just earlier in this issue, right?
Yeah. But it seems like clearly, I mean, I know the Osborns have the same hair, but this clearly seems like a younger Osborn.
Correct. And I think like the stinger of the ending isn't quite as impactful if it's Norman, because it's like, I don't think it would be deserving of a full page spread if it was Norman, because, we just saw that earlier in the issue. Right. So, I mean, I think it's clear it's Harry, and relatively clear. I mean, Mark Bagley has done better jobs of distinguishing, I think. But there's a couple of implications here. Like, one is, like, if you're just to take it straight at, like, face value and no other weird shenanigans with this, it's suggesting, like, either Harry isn't, in fact, Kindred, and is just a prisoner of his, which has a whole bunch of implications itself. Like, does Kindred kidnap people and then assume their identity, right? Is he able to, capture people and then pose as them, right? So are we going to see a Kindred that's posing as Carly Cooper, walking around? Right. But then you think about the scenes where, like, there was the scene in I believe it was in like Last Remains, where there was that issue with Kindred standing over the bodies of Liz and Normie as they slept, right? And so
Yeah.
it's like, well, why would Kindred do that if he wasn't
Had no connection to these characters. Yeah.
right? Or unless that's like part of him, like assuming his role as Harry is like, being in their lives, or maybe that was like the moment that he kidnapped Harry that we were seeing replayed. But I don't necessarily think that that's what this is.
Yeah, I mean, not to cut you off, but
Yeah, go
I mean,
ahead.
I would rule that out to mostly. I mean, like I know we've had some theories, from fans, like, oh, Kindred only appears to people in a certain, to what they want to see or what they think they see or whatever, and I get that, but like the fact you know, and maybe this is foolish of me, but I'm trying to base this on the text and trying to read the text a certain way, and like even like, and this is frankly where like the introduction of Carly Cooper here kind of throws me off, because regardless of who, whether who is important versus what with Kindred, the thing is, when it comes to the who, we are being told there is no reason not to believe that this character is some kind of manifestation of Harry Osborn. There has been no indication whatsoever that this character somehow appears differently to anyone else.
Correct.
You know what I mean? Like it's so to suggest otherwise would, and if that proves to be true, would just be like the greatest narrative cheat in the world, and to me would just be completely unfair and have no merit, because there's just no evidence in the text that that's the case. So, like I said, in terms of being annoyed with the whole Carly Cooper thing, is like, okay, so what what does she possibly have in common with Harry that would bring the two of them together in this context? Because it's like, like, I mean, we're not there's no reason to believe that this character is going to assume the identity of Carly. Like I just don't. There's just no reason for it. Like there is no indication that that's going to happen. So why bring these two characters together in this context? I don't know, and it's this is where like trying to play the guessing game becomes more frustrating than fun for me, because it's like, like, to me this is befuddling, because like, to go in a certain direction would undermine the narrative that's already been established, and to undermine the narrative that's already been established, frankly, kind of ruins any fun of the story for me, because then I feel like it's being unfair. I kind of feel like this is Spencer kind of painting himself into a corner here in terms of trying to weave his own mystery here. But so that's my long-winded way of saying I don't really have a guess or a prediction here, because I think this is being set up in a way where you really can't make a fair prediction without completely undermining the story that has been told so far. That's my 2 cents. I don't know. You can feel free to disagree with me 100% on that, Dan. But like, it's just like I feel like throwing guesses out there is pointless, because it's just would be, basically giving the author the out to do a complete cheat on the narrative, which I think is, not a cool thing to do.
Well, it's funny. I'm actually surprised to hear you say this, because I actually think that this issue is like probably the biggest confirmation we've had yet of your original guess as to what was
Right.
going on here. Which is to say, you suggested that this wasn't our current Harry, but the erased Harry from pre-Brand New Day, which has kind of been long your guess as to what's
Yeah,
going on
no,
here.
and I don't disagree with that. I guess that I guess if I was to guess, that would be my guess. But like, again, but the presence of Carly is like completely befuddling me here. Like, it's like, why are we bringing her in here and now, and like with these two characters? Like, where does Carly figure in?
I
Like,
figure
it
she
just seems.
figures in because she's a Brand New Day character, like maybe it's because I'm foggy on the relationship between Carly and Harry. More immediately, she's the one that found an extra body in the morgue, right?
Right.
And,
Right.
you know, let's just play out your idea, and I'm going to make some really spurious guesses here. You know, I think we said at the time, maybe the extra body is another corpse of Harry Osborn, you know, or the
Right.
dead body that, like, reportedly, like, Mysterio made to fake everybody out about Harry dying or whatever. Like there's another Harry Osborn, and Carly discovered it, right? Which would make sense that Kindred wouldn't want that known, right? So maybe thematically she's not necessarily tied in, but like in terms of protecting his secret and who he is under the bandages or whatever is which we've seen, right? He pulled his mask off and it was Harry. You know, we did see that, you know, so I think this is all just moving towards your thing, right? Seeing another Harry in this prison cell, like in my mind, that's Harry Lyman. I know he renounced the name, but it's an easier way to separate the two. You know, that is Harry Lyman, and Kindred is this dead alternate Harry that I got erased from the timeline. And to my mind, this is like a chess move closer to you saying checkmate, Mark. So I don't necessarily disagree with you, but I actually think that you were right. And you know, like it pains me to say that you're like, you know, pained that you're so right, Mark.
No, I hear you. And you're right. I shouldn't, when I say like I don't really have a guess, I guess it's more like this doesn't move me from my original like solid guess of what this character is. You know what I mean? Because I feel like to move off of it based on this new evidence, and maybe that's where the frustration is. It's like I'm wondering if this new evidence is going to is it misdirection, or is it meant to kind of move me off of that guess? And if it does move me off of that guess, I feel like we're still cheating. You know, it's worth noting too. I mean, through this whole arc, whenever Mordo is communicating to Kindred, he refers to him as Demon. You know, like and even, you know, even though like Mordo doesn't really know where where Kindred's origins are, and Mephisto didn't know where Kindred. Well, Mephisto was just like, wherever he is, he's not mine. He's not one of mine. I mean, Mephisto could be full of crap. I mean, that's not like, you know, beyond the character. But like, it is worth knowing that like these demonic characters are acknowledging Kindred as a demon in kind, which I think is important as we kind of go into this, because again, like if this was just Harry Osborn under a mask, Harry Osborn as we currently know him is not a demon. It's some demonic version of Harry Osborn.
Well, but that's why the why remains more prevalent than the who, right? Like I think Mark, exactly. you figured out who it was ostensibly early on. You know, the question is, why is it appearing as Harry Osborn, and what does it want? You know, and how is it all tied? And clearly it's all tied up in One More Day, because we wouldn't have had all of these allusions to it. Mephisto being brought in. So like we're getting there. And for me, I was like, this is really exciting, because I felt like I could stop guessing. Like, I'm like, okay, Mark was right. Everything is lined up and we're moving towards this end game. You know, I've been saying that for a long time, that we've been moving towards this end game. But like, to me, this was like, oh yeah, like let's just get straight to it. Like, your guesses are probably right. And I'd be curious to how this plays to maybe audiences that didn't know that. They might be like, whoa, like what is happening here?
Yeah.
And whereas you and I are kind of like, well, I mean, that's kind of what we figured, you know.
That's what we've been saying this whole time. But so I'm just going to throw this question out there just to make sure that I'm not off base here. And it kind of actually is playing off of something you just said a few minutes ago that kind of sparked this in me. Carly Cooper, I know that we've gotten backstory, especially like with her father and stuff like that. But like, from a very literal sense, Carly Cooper did not exist until Brand New Day, correct?
Correct. I mean, ostensibly she did, but she's friends with Lily Hollister. Is my
Right.
remembrance. So
Right.
like
I mean, but like we never referred to her. I mean, like she was never referred to prior to Brand New
no,
Day. She never appeared. No. Okay. So like, you know, like it's just worth noting. I mean, like, you know, when you go back to, you know, what is it, Amazing Spider-Man 545 or 544, whichever the one more day to Brand New Day was. Um, you know, it's worth noting like Harry just kind of shows up in that at that party, and everyone is just like, it's Harry, you know, like no one is like, aren't you dead? And Carly is kind of part of this clique too, and like it makes you wonder, is the connection here, like you just said, oh well, they're both Brand New Day, but it's like, is the connection here even more sinister than that? You know, like is there something going on with Carly where Carly was not Carly prior to Brand New Day, and
mm.
now, you know, like she's brought into this too somehow, you know,
I'm
like,
not sure I'm willing to go that far, but I appreciate the way that it gets me thinking.
yeah,
Because
I'm just saying. I mean, like, you know, like we were introduced into a world where everyone just accepted Carly as is, and I'm not saying that shouldn't be what it is, but like we also, you know, when we go back to those comics, we're also going back to a time where everyone just accepted Harry was back.
right,
When we know that there was something you know, magical afoul going on. So I'm just saying, like, you know,
and he
why
does
are we bringing these
reference
two characters together?
he does reference the devil literally when he returns.
Yes, yes. I'm just saying, like, why are we bringing these two characters together in this moment here when with this storyline that is so clearly entrenched in the mythology of Brand New Day and One More Day? Maybe there's more. You know, like there were two characters that Carly said that were what, there were corpses or corpses missing or whatever, right? It was two characters, right?
There was an extra body.
Yeah,
Yeah,
but I thought there was two extras, right? It was two characters. I
I
thought.
thought it was just one extra body.
I thought she said two. I thought that you know, when we go back it was two.
I'm gonna
Anyway,
I'm gonna have to revisit that, but I thought it was one. But
okay.
I can't tell you specifically. I don't have it in front of me, but anyway, that's an interesting thought. In regards to this story, though, Carly seems like a genuine actor, right? Like she was like trying to warn MJ about an extra body, and here she's
Yes.
trying to escape. So she doesn't,
Yeah.
whatever it is, she's not a part of it. At least it appears to be. Because why would you
No.
try to like unravel something that you're a part of?
Just saying. Think about it.
Okay.
Just giving you something to think about, Dan. That's all.
Well, you know me,
That's
Mark. Now I'm gonna really think about it.
You're gonna go down that rabbit
Yeah,
hole. There you go.
you're gonna send me spinning here.
Yeah.
Any thoughts on like Mark Bagley overall? I mean, I talked about the level of detail here. I mean, I thought it was a really well drawn issue, even if I get hung up on the like Norman Harry similarities.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that aside, no, you know, like this is Bagley's wheelhouse in terms of the kind of stuff he's doing. I mean, you know, I would have loved to see some more action stuff, but that's not through any fault of his. Um, you know, but yeah, I mean, it's not the most visually arresting issue aside from Bagley doing the best he can with it and doing well with it. I shouldn't make it sound like doing the best he can, like, oh well, you know, A for effort there, Mark. But you know what I mean? Like he did a great job with it, but I mean, there was nothing really in there in the book that was like, oh wow, what a great comic. But also like, you know, you know, any kind of action that was rendered there was well done, and you know, the emotion, you know, between the characters and a mask, I thought was well done. I mean, Spider-Man looking forlorn and kind of like, you know, playing with the perspective with him and the Avengers. I thought that was a really well done sequence. So I mean, Bagley was good. I mean, Bagley's a pro, but this was one of the better Bagley issues I thought so far.
Yeah, I think John Dell's inks really work well with him too. Like that's a good
Yep.
pairing.
They've
Um,
been together forever, I feel like, so
yeah.
that makes sense.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so let's get to our grades on this one. Mark, I'm throwing it to you again this week.
Yeah, I mean, I'm gonna say B minus, and you know, that might seem a tick low, or maybe I'm gonna end up being the same grade as you. But like I you know, I appreciated the step back of this issue. I like I had said earlier, I would have liked to see maybe some more advancement with Spider-Man himself, and maybe kind of setting up the Chameleon arc a little bit more than what we got. And the Kindred stuff, like, like, I don't know, like, it's I don't begrudge it. I think that these are interesting reveals. It's just it's just hard to get too excited by it at this point, because what we're learning about now, it seems to be, we're not going to get a payoff for it for another 10-15 issues anyway. So it's just kind of like, okay, great. So B- for me.
I'm giving this one a B, but I think I could very much give it a B plus. I just don't think that it's like super Peter oriented, although I think there's a lot of really good Peter moments, and it's just not like a fully rounded issue of Spider-Man with like all the aspects of the character, which I think gets you like a B plus A territory. But I had a lot of fun with it, and I think a lot of the teases and stuff like really got me thinking and excited, and to see things kind of like coalescing, even as we get a new mystery with Betty, so to speak. But anytime this book focuses on the supporting cast and Peter simultaneously, automatically gets my buy-in. So B, but I could very well easily go B plus, because grades don't mean anything. I like this comic,
especially our grades.
Yeah, right. Like they're influencing things, but no, I liked this comic. So I it got me pumped for what's to come. And excited to proclaim your prognostications, Mark, even if you won't take the credit for it.
I've never seen a situation where I have like been so reluctant to be right before, but here we are.
you just hate being right. Okay, well, cool. Well, Mark, why don't you take us home?
Absolutely. Well, of course, it is that time for all good things to come to an end. So we want to say thank you to you, the listeners and viewers, or viewer. Maybe we've gotten a few more in the last few minutes, for tuning into this episode of the Amazing Spider Talk.
Yeah, Mark's talking about our awesome YouTube presence, our live show for our Patreon supporters. So if you want to sign up for the Patreon and join us, you can do so, because these things always debut as a live stream hangout with us back when the comic was first released. So if you'd like to help support our show's continued existence and these reviews while joining us on the live stream, why not head on over to our Patreon and sign up? And the Patreon helps make the podcast happen. It allows us to do things, like review these comics and, keep people working with us in the future. So this episode, like always, was edited by Rick Coast, who does us a real solid by helping us with the editing. A production support from Andy Myers, who puts together our live streams. Our artwork comes handcrafted by artists Ron Friend, Sal Buscema, and Ray Sumser. And our theme songs were produced by Rylan Bojack, Tony Thaxton, and Spider Madge. So, Mark, wrapping up the show, until we decide to reconnect in person after this COVID thing, only for me to discover that you are pregnant, what's our motto?
Wow, Dan. I mean, that's it's quite the discovery. I would say that our motto is, with great podcasts, there must also come the Amazing Spider Talk.
So, Mark, who's the daddy?
You're the daddy, Dan.
Oh, no. Have a good night, everybody.
Good night.
Too many